Alright, we're going to look at the drum unit and the imaging unit as a whole, and some of the things that you can do to kind of clean it up and make sure that it's working properly and extending the lifespan of it as best you can. The first thing you want to look at is this green drum. That's the most important thing. Keep in mind that these are light sensitive, so make sure if you do pull these out that you're going to do it in a dimly lit environment. You don't want bright light, especially sunlight, to shine on these for any period of time, because you can ruin them, and you'll get very horrible pictures if that ever happens. First thing what I want to do is I actually want to go down and look real closely at the drum, and sometimes it's hard to tell, but I'm just going to rotate it forward, and as you can see, as I rotate it, I'm getting some little lines that aren't being scraped off, some little toner dust. What happens is it's supposed to rotate forward, and right in this little crevice here there's a blade that scrapes this drum of any excess toner. And sometimes if it's not making a very good connection, it's gonna kind of skip over some spots. Another thing you want to watch out for is if we look a little bit closer in that little crevice, you can see kind of some bigger debris on occasion in certain spots, and we want to make sure that that bigger debris is definitely removed, because what's going to happen is if that hardens, you're going to start to see lines forming where it's constantly scraping in the same spot, and it's going to degrade your image quite a bit if you let that get too far. So what I want to do, first of all, this drum actually looks okay. It's not the best, but it's going to work. It still has quite a bit of lifespan left in it, I think. So I'm going to leave the drum in it. I am going to clean it, and you can clean these with a little bit of, well, preferably just a dry cloth or a dry paper towel. But if you do need to use any sort of moisture, I would recommend like a little alcohol pad, or what I use is a product called Plastic Clean. And what you want to make sure of is if you clean one portion, make sure it's completely dry before you move forward. If there's any moisture on this drum as it goes back through the toner and developer, it's going to kind of develop a paste, and that's how you can start to get some of those bigger debris issues in there. So you want to make sure it's completely dry before you move on to the next section. Clean it, wipe it down, make sure it's dry, and then keep going until it's completely done. So I'm not going to do that right now. First, my biggest priority is getting some of that debris out of there. And in order to get access to that blade, we're going to spin this around. And I find it easiest to kind of put it right at the edge of a table here. And then the blade is held on by two screws, and you can see one right here, and then on the other side another one right there. The spring is holding another piece on, so that doesn't come into play. But when you remove those two screws, that blade will most likely it'll fall right out. You might get a little bit of toner dust and developer dust that falls down, but that's okay. Alright, as you can see, I removed the two screws, and one thing I should also mention, the reason I do this at the edge of a table is because you don't want to turn these units upside down, because all that toner and developer will just fall right out, and you don't want to do that. So always make sure that the drum is facing upward before you do anything with the imaging units. So again, as you can see, I pulled that blade out, it fell out, it got some toner and some dust, and as you can see on the top of that blade, there's a lot of buildup. And so what I want to do is, first off, shake off all the excess, but then clean that blade. And that's just a rubber blade, so it's not, you know, stiff or anything like that. It's just supposed to kind of put a little bit of pressure on that drum to scrape that stuff off. Okay, so there we have it all cleaned up, and what you can do is just go along the whole length of it. Make sure that top edge is nice and complete, really. If you notice any gouges or cracks or tears in that rubber, you're going to want to replace that whole blade. These blades go for I think around $40, so they're a little bit more expensive for what it is, but they are pretty important in the whole process of developing the pictures. So mine looks pretty good. I don't think I have to replace it. Some other things that I've done in the past, if I have buildup that is hardened on the edge of that, I've taken a razor blade and just kind of scraped a little bit along the top, not cutting, but just kind of scraping it with the razor blade in the perpendicular position to the actual rubber blade there. So you want to be very careful. You don't want to cut it. You don't want to, you know, slip and make any sort of indentations or anything like that, but just kind of scraping it very gently will get some of that harder, rough stuff off of the edge there. Okay, now spinning it back around after I've installed that blade, you can look down in that little crevice again and you can see that most of the bigger debris has now been removed, and that's a good thing. So when we move this blade forward, we should probably see less and less of the toner that's been left on the drum, and that is indeed the case. You might have to go a couple rotations to get it, but it looks like that solved our problem. So that is good, and we've probably just saved ourselves a couple $100 to have somebody come out and look at this. Very quick and easy. It just took 2 screws to get that out and get that cleaned. And we also have a pretty good idea of the remaining lifespan of the drum. You just want to see a nice solid green, nice deep in color. There are different manufacturers, so you might have one that's kind of cloudy. That's okay, just as long as the coloring along the length of the drum is pretty consistent. That kind of tells you that everything's still in good shape, still has quite a bit of lifespan. The manufacturer actually recommends that you change these drum units out pretty much, I believe it's every 40 to 50,000 cycles, but these things will last way, way longer than that as long as you just keep them clean like we just did, and make sure that there's no debris in there that's kind of scraping and making any sort of lines in the drum unit to prevent a good quality image. So keep these clean. Again, if you're a high capacity office, you probably want to look at these at least once a quarter, but they can degrade pretty quickly if there ever is an issue. So just be careful of that, and again, make sure you keep it out of the light. So I hope this helps. Thanks for watching.